All right, here's a lesson for notes 5-1, distance formula and midpoint formula. Distance formula is a formula used to find the distance between two coordinate points. So given x1 and y1 and x2, y2, this is what it looked like on a coordinate plane, x1, y1, x2, y2. The distance between the points is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So we would plug in the numbers for x2 and x1, y2 and y1 into this formula to figure out the distance. The point that you label x1, y1 or x2, y2 doesn't matter as long as you put it into the formula this way. So let's take a look at an example here. It says find the distance between points -5, 2 and -3, 5. So again, it doesn't matter how we label our points, but I'm going to call this one x1, y1, x2, y2. Then we're going to put this into the formula. So x2 gets plugged in for x2, x1 gets plugged in for x1, y2 gets plugged in for y2, and y1 gets plugged in for y1. So using my formula here, it's going to be d equals the square root -3 minus -5 squared plus -5 minus 2 squared. So keep in mind the minus between the x's and the y's is always minus, and you need to plug in the values exactly as they are. So if it's negative, you should plug in a negative. If it's a positive, you should plug in a positive. So now in terms of how we simplify this, we should do order of operations. So we're going to do inside parentheses first. So we're going to do inside the parentheses here. So it's going to be the square root. So -3 minus 5, we add the opposite when we're subtracting. So -3 plus 5 is going to be 2. And then -5 minus 2. So that's going to be -7. Then we do exponents. So now we're going to do the squaring part. So -2 squared is going to be 4. -7 squared, -7 times -7 is positive 49. And then lastly, we're going to add these two together. So 4 plus 49 is going to be 53. So it's going to be square root of 53. And then we're going to go ahead and put that in our calculator. So when we type the square root of 53 in our calculator, you're going to round to two numbers after the decimal, so it's going to be 7.28. So the distance is going to be approximately 7.28. All right, so here's another example. It says, how far is the windmill from the sailboat? This is from the warm-up challenge problem. So the windmill, as we can see, is right here, and the coordinates of that point is going to be 6, 2. And then the sailboat is right here, and the coordinates of that point is going to be 8, 5. So now we can use the distance formula to find the distance. So again, it doesn't matter which one you label, x1, y1. I'm going to label the first point x1, y1. Second point x2, y2, and I'm going to plug it in. So it's going to be 8 minus 6 squared plus 5 minus 2 squared. So order of operations, we're going to do the parentheses first. So 8 minus 6 is 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then we're going to do the exponents. So 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and then we're going to add those. 9 plus 4 is 13. So the distance is going to be the square root of 13. All right, so we're going to put that in our calculator. So square root of 13 is approximately 3 points, so we're going to round that up to 61, so 3.61. So the distance between the windmill and the sailboat is 3.61 units. All right, so now let's look at some of the practice problems. So again, doesn't matter which one you label, x1, y1, but I'm going to label my first point x1, y1, x2, y2, and then we're going to use the distance formula. So it's x2 minus x1, so 2 minus -6 squared And then it's going to be -8 minus -10 squared. So again, making sure that there's a minus sign between and that the negative sign comes with a number. So now we're going to simplify inside the parentheses. So 2 minus -6 is going to be 2 plus 6, which is 8. -8 minus 10, when we have a double negative, it turns to positive. So -8 plus 10 is going to be 2. And then we can simplify a little further here. 8 squared is 64. 2 squared is 4. So that's going to be square root of 68. And then we can put that in our calculator. So square root of 68 is 8.25. So the distance is approximately 8.25. And then looking at the second example, they don't give us the coordinate points, but we can write this out. So the first point on the left, that's going to be -2, 0. And the second point on the right is going to be 3, -5. And now we're going to use distance formula. So I'm going to use the blue point as my x2, y2. So it's going to be 3 minus -2 squared plus -5 minus 0 squared. And then we're going to simplify inside the parentheses. So double negative turns to positive. So 3 plus 2 is 5. -5 minus 0 is just -5. And then we're going to do the exponents. 5 squared is 25. -5 squared, -5 times -5 is also 25. So that's going to be the square root of 50, which we're going to put in our calculator. So square root of 50 is 7.07. So now let's talk about the midpoint formula. So the midpoint formula is a formula used to find the midpoint or middle between two coordinate points. So given points x1, y1, x2, y2, again, doesn't matter which one you label x1, y1, x2, y2. The midpoint formula, or the middle, is going to be the coordinate point x1 plus x2 divided by 2 and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So since midpoint, we're finding a point, your answer is going to be listed as a coordinate point. So here's an example. So again, it doesn't matter how you label your points, you just need to make sure you plug stuff in the right place. So if this is x1, I'm going to plug that in for x1. x2 is going to get plugged in here. y1 gets plugged in here. And then y2 gets plugged in here. So in this formula, we're adding the points and dividing by 2. So adding the x's and dividing by 2. So it's going to be -5 plus -3 divided by 2. And then it's going to be 2 plus -5 divided by 2. So we're going to simplify the numerator. So -5 plus 3 is -8 over 2. And then 2 plus -5 is -3 over 2. So then simplifying our fractions, -8 divided by 2 is -4. And -3 divided by 2 is -1.5. So the midpoint between the 2 points is going to be at 4, -4, -1.5. Okay, so let's look at a couple practice problems. So again, doesn't matter how you label, but let's just call the first point x1, y1, and then we have x2, y2. So for midpoint, we're going to add our x values, 2 plus -1, divided by 2, and we're going to add the y values, -9 plus 4 divided by 2. Now we just simplify. -2 plus -1, or 2 minus 1, is going to be 1 over 2. And then -9 plus 4, that's going to be -5 over 2. So my midpoint, 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, and -5 divided by 2 is -2.5. All right, let's look at example number 4. Find the midpoint of the line segment. So again, we're not given coordinates, but we can write out those coordinates. So the coordinate of the point on the left is going to be -5, 1. And the point on the right is going to be 4, 0. And then from there, we can find the midpoint. So we're going to add the x values. So it's going to be negative 5 plus 4 divided by 2. And then we're going to add the y values, 1 plus 0 divided by 2. So starting with the x values, negative 5 plus 4 is going to be negative 1 over 2. And 1 plus 0 is 1 over 2. So that means my midpoint is going to be negative 0.5, comma 0.5. And if we graph that point, we should clearly be able to see that that's the middle. So negative 0.5 is right here, and we can see there that that is the midpoint, which means that this line segment here is the same length as this line segment, since that blue point there is right in the middle.